If you're a fan of heavy music that takes its time, builds, evolves, and ultimately crushes you with atmosphere, you probably already know the name ISIS. They were formed in the late 90s, and they helped pioneer an entire subgenre of metal that we now call post-metal. Over the course of a decade, they went from hardcore punk roots to creating some of the most intellectual and textured heavy music of the 2000s. The story starts with their first EP, Mosquito Control, released in 1998. It was heavy, it was rooted in hardcore doom and sludge, but you could already hear their experimentation with repetition and these kind of evolving structures. They went through a few lineup changes early on, but by the year 2000, they had released their first full-length debut called Celestial. Now, at this point, they were still very much part of the metal and the hardcore scene, and they were touring with bands like Converge and Neurosis, but they were about to make a shift that would change their trajectory completely. Around 2002, the band signed to an independent label run by Mike Patton of Faith No More. This era gave us the album Oceanic. If Celestial was the heavy, concrete foundation, Oceanic was where they started to float. They moved away from traditional hardcore and started incorporating more elements of ambient music and post-rock. This was the birth of that signature ISIS sound. Massive, lengthy songs that focused on evolution rather than verse-chorus structures. Critics loved it. It was named Album of the Year by Rock Sound and Terrorizer, and it really opened them up to a wider audience beyond just metalheads. Aaron Turner, the singer, he called this their quintessential album. Oceanic was followed up with Panopticon in 2004, which tightened the sound and added a political edge, even though the band has said many times that they're not really a political band. Then, In the Absence of Truth was released in 2006, and this saw them getting more melodic and technical. Finally, they ended their career with Wavering Radiant in 2009, a more polished, dynamic send-off before their final breakup. But if you want to understand the sound of post-metal, you have to go back to that moment in 2002. You have to go back to Oceanic. So why is Oceanic such a big deal? When it was released, September 16th, 2002, it marked a departure for the band. Up until this point, ISIS was defined by a coarse, unforgiving tone. They were heavy. They didn't abandon the heaviness, but they introduced lengthy periods of clean guitars and ambient noise. It wasn't just about the riff anymore. It was about the space between the riffs. Even though Oceanic often gets framed as a sharp left turn in the ISIS catalogue, something that I've actually already done here in the introduction, that description needs a little nuance. The band didn't suddenly discover atmosphere, melody, or long-form experimentation out of nowhere in 2002. Those instincts were already baked into their DNA. You can hear it clearly in the earlier material, most notably in the latter half of Celestial, where the aggression recedes and the band stretches out into something more patient, hypnotic, almost alien and exploratory. Those moments weren't accidents. They were early signals of where ISIS was already heading. So what Oceanic did then wasn't invent a new language so much as commit fully to one that had previously appeared in flashes. The band leaned hard into these expansive ideas, giving them room to breathe and, crucially, structuring entire songs and an entire album around them. The experimentation became the foundation rather than a detour. And in doing so, Isis refined and evolved their sound into something more cohesive, immersive, emotionally resonant, and turning what was once almost interludes in a sense into the core of their identity. They brought in Maria Christopher from the band 27 to sing on tracks like The Beginning and the End, Carry, and Wait. It added this haunting, human texture that contrasted perfectly with Aaron Turner's deep, guttural roars. Critics at the time noticed this immediately. One reviewer described it as a place where crunching guitars and hoarse, tuneless vocals and slow spaciness all converge in on each other. Now, you can listen to this album just for the music, but there is actually a dark, cohesive story running underneath the surface. Oceanic is a concept album. According to frontman Aaron Turner, the narrative follows a man who is on the brink of emotional emptiness. He finds a woman who seems to complete him. And these are themes you're going to hear in the opening song, The Beginning and the End. But the story takes a disturbing turn. The protagonist discovers that the woman has been involved in a long-term relationship with her brother. You see this unravel in songs like The Other and False Light. The revelation drives the man back into his emotional coma, and the story ends tragically. The whole album is littered with lyrics that are incredibly grim and dark. The imagery, it's consistently bleak, and it reinforces that feeling of being pulled under the water. It's a heavy concept that expands on themes they had touched on in their earlier EP, The Red Sea. It's hard to overstate how important this record was for the genre. Before Oceanic, post-metal was a bit of a vague term. Lots of different bands were trying to evolve the sound of sludge and doom and experiment with ambient sounds and instrumentals. After Oceanic, this became a standard. Oceanic basically wrote the rulebook that bands like Cult of Luna would follow. Now, at the time, the acclaim was universal. Oceanic, it was a masterpiece, and it proved heavy metal could be intelligent, patient, and devastatingly emotional. Before we dive into the concepts behind this album, a quick heads up. Oceanic deals with some incredibly dark, heavy themes that unfortunately the all-seeing YouTube algorithm finds a little too spicy for its delicate sensibilities. So, to ensure this video doesn't get banished to the shadow realms, I'm going to have to use some, let's call them creative euphemisms. If I start talking about permanent naps or family dynamics that are way too close for comfort, just read between the lines. We're all adults here. You know what I'm actually saying. So let's keep the robots happy and we'll get into it. Revisiting this album for this video, I honestly didn't realize just how much of an impact it would still have on me. Oceanic is this striking mix of intensity, not just musically, but lyrically too. As we've said before, it deals with some incredibly heavy themes like isolation and the end of one's journey, but it balances that darkness with these epic, spiraling instrumentals. Because the whole album is water themed, they pull off the atmosphere so well that I genuinely feel like I'm out floating alone in the ocean when I'm listening to it. It's an incredibly versatile and powerful record. Now, for context, as I've said before, this is a concept album. It's telling a dark narrative about a man's journey through love and a devastating betrayal, specifically discovering that his new love has been hiding a dark taboo secret regarding her family, which ultimately leads to his final surrender to the ocean. Water is a central theme that ties the story and the music together in this haunting, immersive way. But I have to warn you, even with its melodic moments, this is a tough listen. Not because it's crushingly heavy, there's plenty of death metal and black metal that's quote unquote heavier, but because the instrumentals are deliberately dissonant, they twist and they clash in ways that keep you on edge. The vocals are somewhat off-kilter and unpredictable. It's like the singer's intentionally unsettled, which, if you understand the story, is understandable. Now, by the time you finish the 9 tracks, you will feel like you have been dragged through a beautiful but chaotic storm. One final thing before we break down the tracks. Everything I'm about to say is just my personal interpretation. ISIS was famous for keeping their concepts vague and letting the listener fill in the blanks. While there are generally accepted themes about the story, the specific emotional beats and narrative twists that I'm describing are just how I hear it. Your mileage may vary, and honestly, that's the beauty of this band. The story is whatever you need it to be. So, without further ado, let's break down the tracks. The album opens with the beginning and the end. Here, the protagonist is reflecting on the events that led him to this point. He started out at his absolute lowest. He meets a woman who seems to save him, and then he discovers her betrayal. And now, he's back at the water's edge. The song opens with a groove and a tone that immediately draws you in. Once the lyrics start, you can almost feel a storm is brewing. You get this sense of ocean winds whipping around you as you teeter on the edge of the abyss. Midway through, a female voice emerges, and it adds this almost surprising tenderness to the abrasive guitars. Her vocals are muffled, and this helps to pull you in deeper to the music. Until around the 4 minutes and 57 seconds mark, where everything erupts into a massive crescendo. The last lines of this song hit me harder than anything else. Long before I knew the concept behind this album, this song always felt like it was about a final departure to me. It still feels like their best song, not just on this album, but across their entire discography. Next is The Other. So in the story, the protagonist is now submerged. His thoughts drift off to the brother, the other person, who, along with the woman, has architected this betrayal. This track starts slow and brooding, and around the minute 10 mark, the guitars layer in more melody, building the emotional weight before these harrowing vocal screams kick in. Feel the raw despair. Musically, this song is pure dissonance. There's hardly any melody, just raw, guttural sound. The track runs over 7 minutes, and I'll be honest, it isn't really until around the 4 minutes 20 seconds mark that I feel like I can really start to enjoy it. It's more of a mood piece. It's building tension until that final moment where you can actually nod your head and lose yourself in the music. The song closes with Aaron Turner screaming with a raw intensity that is a perfect fit for the story this song is telling. Then we have False Light. At this stage, the man is no longer just sinking. He's beginning to go under. This song dives into the deception. He once saw this woman as his savior, but now he realizes she's a fraud. The lyrics capture that moment. The illusion shatters. Musically, this is the heaviest track on the album. It kicks off with intense riffs and epic drums, but then around the 3-minute mark we get a reprieve, a slow, melodic instrumental section that feels like a wave of bliss. That last maybe 3 minutes, before the riffs return for a brutally progressive ending. The lyrics talk about discovering bliss and serenity in that final descent. It captures that haunting idea that people supposedly feel a cold, detached calm right at the end. Next up is Carry. Here, to me at least, the ocean is personified as a female entity, literally carrying the man away. For the longest time, this was actually my favourite song on the record. The first half is an instrumental masterclass. The soft guitar melodies evoke a real sense of floating. This is one of the few albums where the music so accurately captures its theme. I can almost smell the salty air. Around the 4-minute mark, the guitars kick into overdrive. Then, at 5 minutes and 34 seconds, there's a riff change that introduces a groove that makes me want to nod my head, just as the drums return. The screams at the end just give me goosebumps every time I hear it. We then move into 2 instrumental tracks. First, the Untitled track. This is deeply ambient, filled with gurgling sounds and bubbles. It has a very alien tone, representing the transition he's going through. That leads into Maritime, which leans more on traditional instruments, bass, guitars and drum. It has a gentle ebb and flow that settles you down, setting the stage perfectly for the next track. And that next track is Wait. This feels like an extension of the man's transition from this world to whatever comes next. You can feel the weight of the water pulling him down, yet the burden of existence seems to lift. Despite the dark context, the track is surprisingly uplifting. It's the longest track on the album, clocking in around 11 minutes. And it doesn't even introduce distortion until about the 6-minute mark. It builds to a crescendo, drops back down, and then rises again, with these eerie vocals echoing in the background. It's haunting. Then we have From Sinking. Here, the man has fully accepted his fate. He ceases to fight. Musically, the song starts heavy, but it's not fast-paced. It trundles along like a behemoth wading through sludge. Plays with this dynamic of softening into gentle instrumentals and then returning to aggressive guitars. A riff change around the 4-minute 20-second mark signals the final stretch, closing with brutal vocals and slamming drums. Finally, we reach the closing track, Hymn. This is an abstract portrayal of the end itself, crushing and airless. It drags the listener through those final moments. It starts slow and heavy with bellowing vocals. But then the music drops away, revealing a crushing melodic riff around the 2-minute mark that instantly makes me want to bang my head. From there, it slows down into almost tribal style drumming and high-pitched screams. The song transitions into one last calm, water-inspired passage that builds until the distortion returns, grinding its way through the final moments of the album. So, what is the verdict? Oceanic isn't just an album, it's a voyage. Isis crafted a work that demands patience and attention, but the rewards are profound. From the stormy intensity of the opener to the bleak surrender of the finale, every track carries you deeper into this meticulously constructed world. It balances dissonance and atmosphere in a way few records can. It's heavy yet melodic, brutal yet tender. For those willing to embrace its depth, Oceanic is immersive, transformative, and hauntingly beautiful. It's a cornerstone of post-metal that continues to resonate over 2 decades later. It's an album that doesn't just get played, it gets lived. it's an experience.